Good Sunday morning, everyone. Today on Perspectives, we're focusing on our weather. And of course, we're now halfway through the year and already severe storm systems have ravaged sections of our nation. Today, we ask the experts about the weather patterns that create these monster storms and how these systems also affect our coastal weather. This spring, you may remember the Midwest took a pounding because of severe weather. And of course, according to officials, more than 200 tornadoes swept through the Midwestern U.S. in over just a 13-day period. These violent cyclones left several people dead and dozens more injured. Hundreds of homes and public buildings were also destroyed. Our folks in Alabama have also been affected this year. In March, in fact, tornadoes swept through eastern and southwest Alabama, Georgia, and the Florida Panhandle. Lee County, Alabama suffered the greatest damage. Now, weather officials in Lee County say that more than 20 people were killed by a twister that had winds greater than 166 miles per hour. The Gulf Coast is certainly not a stranger to tornadic activity. In fact, on June 7th, severe thunderstorms spawned what weather officials called a brief EF0 tornado in Chickasaw. The twister caused some minor damage to buildings there, and the winds were estimated to be about 75 miles per hour. Fortunately, no injuries were reported. Another important weather concern, especially here on the Gulf Coast, hurricanes. That's right, with a new hurricane season now beginning, some residents of the Florida Panhandle are still recovering from one of the most powerful hurricanes in history. Hurricane Michael slammed into northwest Florida as a Category 5 storm, packing winds of 160 miles per hour. It caused catastrophic damage to several counties there on the Panhandle. Now, National Weather Service officials say the hurricane killed 30 people and indirectly caused the death of 40 more because of the size and scope of the hurricane. Now, damages are actually still being assessed today. A Category 5 is at the very top of a scale that measures a hurricane strength. Well, what's in store for this year? Well, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, predicts a near normal 2019 Atlantic hurricane season with conditions. For more on that, here's NOAA's Dr. Jerry Bell.
Here at NOAA, we're predicting a 40% chance that the 2019 Atlantic hurricane season will be near normal. There's a 30% chance of the season being above normal, and also a 30% chance of the season being below normal. Overall, this year's outlook reflects competing climate factors. The ongoing El Nino is expected to help suppress the activity. In contrast, warmer than average sea surface temperatures in the tropical Atlantic Ocean and an expected stronger than normal West African monsoon favor increased activity.
Dr. Jerry Bell is a hurricane climate specialist and research meteorologist at NOAA. Well, joining us for today's discussion on weather patterns affecting our Gulf Coast region is Fox 10 Chief Meteorologist Jason Smith. Now, Jason will tell us if this year's weather trends have been unusual and what to expect for the remainder of the year. And also joining us on Perspectives this morning, Zach Hood, Director of the Baldwin County Emergency Management Agency, and Dr. Keith Blackwell, Associate Professor of Meteorology at the University of South Alabama. Dr. Blackwell is a hurricane expert for South Alabama's Coastal Weather Research Center. Perspectives continues in just a moment when we're joined by Chief Meteorologist Jason Smith. And good morning again, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on Perspectives. And we're discussing today our weather patterns affecting the Gulf Coast. And joining us now, as we mentioned, Fox 10 News Chief Meteorologist Jason Smith. And Jason, we thank you so much for taking time to talk about this in this perspective. Sure. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, it's great to be here, and we're getting into a new hurricane season, so all eyes are on the tropics at this point.
Indeed. Give us if we step back a second and talk a little bit about what has happened since January as we've been dealing with tornadoes and other severe weather, not only here but across the country.
And we've seen a very active pattern, and we've seen a lot of rainfall in the Midwest. That's created a lot of flooding there. We've had some severe weather there as well, as we mentioned earlier in the show. And it's created so much rainfall, the Mississippi River has been way above average, near record flooding occurring, with some record flooding in some areas in the Midwest. And that's creating a lot of sediment and runoff out into the Gulf. It's creating an oxygen-deprived dead zone out into the Gulf of Mexico.
I remember seeing that earlier this week in a news story. Now, you used the word record in several parts of what you just shared. So are things different? People are always concerned now about the different opinions about whether there are changes taking place or just the normal weather that we should expect.
Well, there's a lot of different things going on about the flooding. I mean, we certainly had an anomalous pattern where we had a really strong ridge, and that kept our area very, very dry, and it kept all the storms right over the central part of the United States and in the Midwest. And there are unusual things that do set up with the weather, but you know, we have increased urbanization, so we have more pavement, deforestation, more runoff, and so we're more vulnerable to flooding all throughout the country simply because we're not able to get that moisture in the ground. It wants to run off and get in the streams.
Can we talk about urban? And we had a tornado in Chickasaw, and when I was growing up years ago, you know, you really didn't hear about many urban areas being affected by things like tornadoes, but things are changing.
Right, as we're starting to see more widespread urbanization, there's more areas that could be potentially hit just because the population's increased and we have a higher population density across the Gulf Coast. So we did have a very weak tornado that popped up in Chickasaw. It was an EF0 tornado, so it's relatively weak, but it was still strong enough to do some damage there along Craft Highway.
Lee County, Alabama, we hated to hear that.
That was a very, very wide and very long tornado. I believe it was about a mile wide, a 24-mile track for that EF4 tornado in Lee County. And what surprises a lot of people, we're not in Tornado Alley, where tornadoes are very common, but we do see tornadoes here, and the problem is when we do, the population density is higher in Alabama, and there are actually more deaths due to tornadoes in Alabama than any other state in the country.
My goodness.
Because of the fact that we have a higher percentage of manufactured housing and a higher population density. We can't see these tornadoes coming. They're often rain wrapped, and they can occur in areas that are densely populated, and unfortunately, in the case of the Lee County tornado, it was a devastating and deadly tornado.
So should our viewers who are watching this morning be more concerned about the weather than the past, or just to practice preparedness?
I think always be on guard. You know, those EF3, EF4, EF5 tornadoes are less common across our section of the Gulf Coast. They're more common in central and northern Alabama, where the dynamics are typically in place. We see a high number of tornadoes down this way, but they're typically like the one in Chickasaw. They're EF0s, EF1s, maybe an occasional EF2. It's not to say that we could not see a large tornado here, but at EF4 and EF5 tornado, that's less than 1% of all tornadoes. They're very unusual to see that type of event occurring.
And of course, Hurricane Michael is still in our minds, and of course our hearts for the people who had to deal with that and the loss of lives. That's something that's scary when you talk about where we're located.
Hurricane Michael, I mean, it was getting towards really the climatological end of the northern Gulf Coast season. We were getting around the 10th of October, and it wasn't quite at the point where we were letting our guard down, but normally once you get past the middle of October, you start getting cold fronts in the area, the water temperature is cool, and Michael was remarkable, unfortunately, in that it strengthened so much as it was making landfall, and a lot of times you see these hurricanes, they get a little weaker as they start to come in. They may be upper level winds, westerlies, or some drier air that's getting brought into the system. Michael just kept getting stronger and stronger, and it actually, after it made landfall, I went back and did some research and found out it was a Category 5 hurricane. Right. And I went to Panama City and Panama City Beach right after Hurricane Michael, and it looked like an EF3 or an EF4 tornado went right through town. I mean, normally when you see a hurricane that goes through, the water oaks, the pecan trees, and the pine trees are all snap, but the live oaks are fine because they're so strong. In Panama City, the live oak trees were on the ground. That's how strong the winds were.
Yeah, I got a chance to go there as well as to Tyndall Air Force Base where I had been stationed years ago, and just a horrific scene to see. We're going to talk more this morning. We also have some guests joining us, and want to promote right now for you, if you haven't already, be sure to download the Fox 10 Storm Tracker app. Now that way you'll never miss an alert when severe weather rolls through our area. It's free, of course, to download for both the Android and Apple devices, and a lot of great information that Jason will have on there for you as well. Well, when Perspectives continues this morning, Dr. Keith Blackwell of the Coastal Weather Research Center at South Alabama joins us, along with Zach Hood, Director of Baldwin County's Emergency Management Agency. They'll join Jason and me for more on coastal weather, as well as response to our severe weather. But first this morning, we hear from some of you about our weather observations and yours.
Right now, I think it's hotter than last year.
We did notice that the Gulf waters are warmer sooner. This year we were walking in the Gulf yesterday thinking maybe it was a little cooler than it was last week. Hopefully the water temperature, it seemed like a little bit cooler because that's a concern.
And welcome back this morning. Joining us here on Perspectives for our continued discussion about our weather, along with our Chief Meteorologist Jason Smith, Dr. Keith Blackwell, the Coastal Weather Research Center at the University of South Alabama, and Zach Hood, Director of Baldwin County's Emergency Management Agency. And we thank you both for also joining the discussion this morning. Dr. Blackwell, you heard some of our dialogue with Jason about the overall perception of where we are with weather today, and a lot of people thinking that things have changed, but do we actually lose focus of year to year and things are pretty much the same?
I think you see cycles, a lot of cycles that go on. And you know, what's happening now has probably happened in the past. It's just that, as Jason mentioned, there are more people to be impacted and we can absorb it more. A lot of tornadoes that maybe went undetected years and years ago, we see them now. I mean, we have Doppler radar and we have a lot of people around when everybody's got a camera, and so we have a lot of I think we have a lot better way to detect them, and but certainly you know, there's significant year-to-year variation and even variation on longer time scales too.
You know, I always think about the Farmer's Almanac, and I was wondering, you know, if some of these things that we have observed recently are in there, like you mentioned, back in that cycle of what, 20 to 30, 50 years ago maybe. Either one of you guys can respond to that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you look at the Atlantic hurricane activity, and you have periods of, you know, 2, 3, maybe even 4 decades of a lot of activity, and then you have a couple of 3 decades of less activity. You know, and since 1995, we've been in a very active period now, and that's going on, you know, more than 20 years now, and so. But if you go look at the time when I first got interested in hurricanes after Hurricane Camille in 1969,
okay,
we were right at the end of the last active hurricane cycle. And so from about 1970 to 1994, you didn't have that many big storms. Now we did have storms like Frederick every now and then, you know, that came through Mobile. And so there were some big storms, but you didn't have really active seasons with a lot of major hurricanes during that period like you do since 1995, and at some point, and there are indications that, you know, I know the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, which is a natural cycle out in the Atlantic, helps control a lot of that oscillation of hurricane activity from decade to decade, and there were signs as early as 2013 and through about 2015 where we may have been switching to the more inactive mode, but then again, the last couple of years, kind of ramp back up again, and you know, we'll see what this year gives us of an average hurricane season, but as indicated by some of the experts. But there's some groups that are going with some fairly intense storms this year.
Right,
so,
always a very scary time of the year, and of course a busy time of the year for all three of you. And of course, Zach, things start ramping up for you, I'm sure, a lot earlier than June 1st, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a process year-round. Every day is a training day, is what we like to say in Baldwin County.
Now, when you look at what happened just a few miles away on the Panhandle, are you using that as a way to train, as a way to be prepared, and a way to alert your community better?
I think all of us look at Hurricane Michael as, what if it were us? What if this was the Alabama Gulf Coast? And the theme of our conversation today has so far been growth and population. And with that growth, you have to look at and recognize, how would we have gotten emergency warnings and notifications out to the public? What would have been the perception if we would have had to recommend a evacuation? So every day that the EMA is open, this is what we strive to answer for residents that maybe they're not involved in the emergency management arena and don't understand even what the emergency management agency is and what we do. And so we like to educate and reach out and be a part of organizations and other entities.
And you're in a very interesting situation from the standpoint of, you've got one of the fastest growing counties every time we get the census reports, and at the same time you've got one of the largest counties in the nation, in fact.
Absolutely.
So those are dynamics as well.
Absolutely. Our population growth is a great problem to have in emergency management. I am honored to have the privilege of discussing how we deal with growth that we see, that we have seen in our county, and what do we do to assist newcomers to the county on coastal hazards. And we had a emergency preparedness expo, and we saw residents that moved recently from areas that have never dealt with tropical weather. They didn't know where to begin, but they came to the expo as a means of getting information that we can get them prepared.
Yeah, it's so
Absolutely.
critical, that information and being informed this time of the year. We're going to talk more when we come back, but right now you all have information out there to help people become more informed and prepared. We've got that Storm Tracker app always available, and of course, Zach, we talked about a publication that's available throughout the county, and Dr. Blackwell, you guys are always available to get information out. And we'll be sharing your numbers as well as the resources throughout the program, as well as at the end of the program, how you can contact everyone to make sure that you are well informed. Now, more discussion on the weather this morning when Perspectives returns. Meantime, the heat is on, of course, and you'll hear from one of our viewers about that as we go to our break.
I want to go to Waterville every day.
Why so?
It's so hot over here. It's just burning up. It feels like it's getting hotter and hotter every year. And we had the early spring.
Well, it's always in the back of my mind. I'm always thinking about, how long do I have before we have to really get serious about this, especially since we enjoy the beach and we have property on the beach and we're concerned about that always. But truthfully, no, because we have it from year to year. And
yeah, I think about it, praying that it don't come this way.
And welcome back this morning. We are talking weather here on the Gulf Coast, and on Perspectives this morning we have our Fox 10 News Chief Meteorologist Jason Smith along with Dr. Keith Blackwell and Zach Hood. And gentlemen, we were talking and you hear what people are saying about it, and you talk about the heat and concern about the hurricane season, and that's always, I'm thinking, people are probably more concerned, you think, maybe this year because of what happened with Hurricane Michael?
I hope so. I mean, we don't want to let our guard down and get complacent. And we've been very fortunate in the Mobile County area specifically, because Hurricane Ivan hit a little to our east, more over towards Pensacola, did affect Baldwin County and Pensacola. Hurricane Katrina, a massive storm, hit well to our west. So we've been right on the fringes of these storms. It's really been since Hurricane Frederick in 1979 since we've had a major hurricane hit us right on the nose. So it's really easy to let our guard down, and I think everybody should be on guard this season. And we're going to be doing some things out in the community to educate and help get people aware of the hurricane season coming up. We're going to have some Storm Tracker events coming up.
All right, so we can go to the website to find out where. And
yeah, fox10tv.com. We've got one coming up downtown on the 20th of June. It's going to be especially with the kids in mind. I know it's that time of the year where kids are looking for something constructive to do. We have a Hurricane Expo planned on downtown on the 20th.
And I'm sure you're called on a lot throughout the year as well. People want to know because they say we want a better idea of where we are.
Yes, and I do speak to community groups and things of that sort. But we also have the Coastal Weather Research Center with us, which is a self-supporting nonprofit organization within the Department of Earth Sciences, and we have about, well, over 100 industrial, governmental, and private clients that subscribe to our service.
Okay.
So I run Hurricane Model for them, and we do quite a good evaluation of storms, each storm threat that comes along, keep them posted on what's going on. So we're pretty active starting about now.
And of course, research and tracking and observations of past systems are so important to keep a track of that and keep abreast. And I'm sure in Baldwin County, as Jason mentioned, where we talk about Ivan and what happened, it's always on your mind as we approach those seasons.
Absolutely, and as we think about that, I like to remind everyone that no matter who you are or where you are a member of the Emergency Management Agency. You know, call us, reach out to us. We have opportunities to volunteer. We have great information. We have released our disaster preparedness guide. It's a publication that is free to the public.
Where is it available?
It's available at the satellite courthouses throughout the county. Also, there's businesses that have partnered with us. They are putting this inside their offices as a way to just reach out to assist. And we're working with I'm going to work with the DOT, getting things in our visitor centers throughout the state, because you know, we talk about the coast and immediate impacts to our area, but it also affects all of the counties, you know, in the southern part of our state when a storm of the magnitude we discussed approaches. So we want to make sure we have good partnerships and relationships, and we like to move forward, as we like to say.
And how important are the evacuation route knowledge? How important is that for people to have, as far as, especially if they're on the coast itself?
Yeah, absolutely. You need to know where you physically are and how your zone is applied in terms of evacuation, that knowledge. You know, whether it's Mobile County or Baldwin County, know how and where to receive evacuation information, and go ahead today, identify what zone you're in and know when to leave and how to get that message.
That's so important, because we don't have enough roads when it comes to a mass evacuation, and so critical. And Jason, I've had the privilege of working with you for years, and we've gone through some coverage of past storms. How do you feel right now? Are you geared up and you've got your department ready to go, Michael?
I just was talking to Michael about that. We are certainly geared up for this year's tropical season. There are a lot of things that go into preparing. We've got our hurricane trackage chart ready to go out now too. So we're definitely prepared for a season, and our job is to just inform folks so they can make the best decisions for their family to keep their family safe during the tropical season, and all that stuff that's being put out from emergency management agencies throughout our area. We're the vehicle to get that information out to the public and make sure that folks get the message and heed the evacuations.
All right, gentlemen, I thank you so much for joining us and talking weather this morning. Zach Hood, Dr. Keith Blackwell, and of course Jason Smith, our chief meteorologist here. We appreciate it, and of course some very important information to share with the viewing audience this morning. And of course, for more information on coastal weather patterns or for information regarding hurricane safety, now you can call the Coastal Weather Research Center or your local EMA office for more information. And of course, Fox 10 News will continue to bring you up-to-the-minute information and coverage whenever that severe weather threatens the Gulf Coast. Now also, as we mentioned earlier, be sure to download the Fox 10 Storm Tracker app. That way you'll never miss an alert when severe weather rolls through. Well, please join us here next Sunday morning again at 7:30 for Perspectives as we discuss important issues and seek solutions. Now, if you have any ideas of topics that you'd like for us to address, just drop that note to us here at Perspectives at fox10tv.com. I'm Eric Reynolds. Have a great week. Thank you. Great information out there.